Hey everybody, this is my book review on How Children Fail by John Holt. So to start, I want to give a summary of the book. So the book How Children Fail was designed and written to give teachers insight into the main reasons children fail in school, and then how we can combat these reasons as teachers. So before I explain the three main reasons, I want to explain the format of the book. The book is written in memos or observations that John Holt took down observing his friend Bill Hull's fifth grade class. And his observations truly were aimed to look at the way children think and behave to find an answer as to why they fail. His observations are divided into four major topics: strategy, fear and failure, real learning, and how schools fail. So all the observations were taken first, and then he divided them into these four topics. So now, the three main reasons why children fail is they are afraid of failing, and what he means by this is they get so scared and worked up over the thought of failing that they actually do fail. They are bored because they feel the work they're doing in school is useless, and this pretty much just means what I explained is just the children don't feel like this work benefits their life in any way. And then they're confused because they cannot make sense of what they're being taught, and this just means like the teacher teaches them and they have no idea what it means and no way to figure out what it means. My main takeaway from this book is that as teachers, it is up to us to take responsibility for our students' learning. And what I mean by that is we have to take their success into our own hands. If something's not working out, if they're not passing, it's not because of something they're doing, it's something we're doing. Because the students will not succeed if we don't provide the tools and support necessary. And the reason I got this takeaway was something John Holt mentioned on page 8, and it was two things that effective schools do. And the first was teachers taking responsibility for their students' learning. If a student met a standard, did not meet a standard, or anything else, it was not something the student did or did not do, it was what the teacher did or did not do. And the second thing he pointed out that effective schools do is that if a teaching method was not producing successful results, they threw it out and tried a new teaching method. So part 1, it was labeled strategy. In this section talked mostly about the strategies children use to avoid what we tell them to do. What I mean by this is the children are so afraid of failing and not getting the answer right that they do anything and everything they can to avoid even giving an answer, so they take away that chance of failing. And there are four main ways children do this. They mumble, so the teacher becomes upset, frustrated, and skips them. They guess an answer and look at the teacher or other students for confirmation, affirmation. The third way is wild guesses. This just means they blurt out something random that comes to their head to just give an answer because they think that's what the teacher wants. And then the fourth way is they convince the teacher to do the work for them. They play dumb until the teacher either gives them the answer or asks so many scaffolding questions that the answer's right there in front of them. So combating these student strategies, why we should do it and how we can do it. It's important to combat these strategies because it's important for who they are as learners. The students must know that they can meet any goal we set for them and they set for themselves. They need to know that it's okay if they don't know the answers, and we can offer help, but we can't do it for them. They can't avoid it forever because that doesn't allow learning to take place. And ways we can combat these student strategies is utilize group discussion. Make the discussion student-led and structure it in such a way that each student has to give a response to find an answer or to come to a conclusion. The second way is to be aware of the scaffolding questions you're asking your students. Ask them in such a way that you're still offering help, but you're not giving them the answer. You're more just steering them in the right direction. And then the third thing is to just tell your students that it's okay to guess, but that's not what you expect from them. You want an actual answer from them and you want them to participate, but if they do not know the answer, it's okay, we can work together, but don't blurt out something just because they think that's what we want to hear. Part 2 is fear and failure. And this section addressed the fear of failure that children fear and then the failure they face nonetheless. And this section really talked about the concept of success and failure and how students and children don't naturally think in terms of success and failure. That is a concept placed upon them by teachers and adults. Holt just mentioned the example of when a baby is learning to walk, if it falls down, it doesn't think, oh dang, I failed at this, I can never do it again. It thinks, oh well, let's try again. They think in terms of effort. It's when the students begin to attempt to please a teacher or adult that failure and success become a part of their lives. And while it talked about that, it also addressed the different fears of failure, like the different forms of the fear it comes in. So the students face a fear of being stupid, so that just means they fear that they're going to be called stupid or ridiculed or feel stupid themselves. They fear being humiliated by classmates and teachers. They fear not knowing the answer, so they fear that no matter what they do, they're not going to know what the answer is. And then they fear not having an answer at all, so that just means they just have no idea what to do and they're just super scared of that. And he also talked about these fears, these 4 fears I mentioned, were things that teachers indirectly taught students because of the ingrained distrust we have in students. So, combating fear and failure, why we should do this and how. And this is super important to combat because it defines who the students are as learners. If we're constantly reinforcing this fear of failure and fear that they're never going to succeed, we really destroy the self-image they have as learners. We need to create an environment for our students where failure is viewed as a starting point, a place for growth, not something that can be humiliated. We need to tell students that their worth is not based on how successful they are, but how hard they're trying. And then this all ties into what John Holt mentions on page 92 of the book, is that children act unintelligently, which causes them to fail just because they are scared. They don't know where to start and they don't know where to begin, so they just don't know what to do, and that causes them to act unintelligently. Ways we can combat this are stop the children from being afraid. Allow the students to know that your classroom is a safe place for them to make mistakes, and that you're always there to answer questions and that you want to help them, because if they know you want them to succeed, they'll feel like they can succeed. Second way is break the bad thinking habits that fear have caused the students to have. Let the students know that not having all the answers and not knowing all the answers does not make them a failure, but gives them the starting place for learning. And what I mean by this is, if they don't know how to do, say, multiplying mixed numbers, that doesn't mean they fail at math. It just means that we know where we can start working with them, and that's a good thing. That means we know how to help. Third way, set a limit to the tension students are under. What I mean by this is students feel tension when they feel like they can't talk to their teachers about what they don't understand. So just allow the students to know that they can tell you in confidence when they do not understand, and you're not going to ridicule them or make them feel any more dumb. And then the fourth way is trust your students to make the right decision because you have taught them how to. When we let our students know that we trust them, it takes away fear that they have, because they're like, no, my teacher has confidence in me and knows I can do this. Part 3 was titled Real Learning, and this section just really addressed the difference between the knowledge children are expected to have and the knowledge they actually have. And the way Holt went about addressing this was he talked in terms of confusing subjects. Teachers teach things like grammar and fractions and lots of subjects that make sense in the teacher's mind because we've been taught it and been practicing it for years. But we never really think about how it looks through the eyes of the student. And then we just teach it and move on. We don't address the fact that it can be confusing, and we don't tell the students that it's okay if it doesn't make sense. And this is what creates the gap between the expected knowledge of what we think they should know and then what they actually know. As well as this, he explains that understanding cannot be taught. Understanding is individually developed. That means that students develop it at their own pace, and we can't expect to teach one lesson and every student in the classroom get it. There are going to be some that get it and some that don't, and we need to respect those that don't and let them take their time in the learning process. And then lastly, he talked about the importance of connections. And we've heard this before in so many classes, that when you can connect things to the real world and things students relate to and understand, it creates the content to be useful and important to them. And so if the students can't see the concept in a context, then they truly won't understand the concept. So we just really need to make sure we're connecting everything to their daily life. So how we can provide real learning, and then why we should. So the reason providing real learning is super vital is because in school, every concept builds on previous knowledge. Everything you learn is an extension of something else you've learned. So if we skip over something, the student can't build on that because they don't have the foundation. We have to bring consistency to the curriculum and let students know, like, hey, we're going to work through this together, and like this makes sense, so this is going to make sense. How we can do this is we can connect everything to the real world, give real world examples, have students come up with examples, give a context to the problem, and make it relevant to their life. And ways practically we can do this as well is ask questions or problems that require actions, not words. So what I mean by this is, like, when you ask a student to solve a problem, have them write out each step instead of just circling a multiple choice answer, because just circling an answer doesn't show us whether they know it or not. Ask them to show you how they got the answer. And then we need to make students problem-centered, not answered-centered. And what I mean by this is answer-centered students are students who are just looking for the answer in a problem. They don't think deeply about the problem. They just want to solve it any way they can and get the answer to move on, because, again, the fear of failure comes in and they're worried. If they spend too long thinking about it, they're not going to get it. But if we make them problem-centered, we can make students who think about the problems and think about the different strategies they can use, and they're not worried about the answer per se, but just worried about how the steps to solving the problem. And we can do this by lightening the workload of the students. So if, say, you give 20 questions for homework, try giving 10. So it gives students less stress, less work to do, so they can focus on the problem instead of the answer. The last part is how schools fail. And this section was really just how schools in general fail their students. And there was multiple ways he talked about, and I only highlighted a few that stuck out to me the most, but they were super important. So one way was the schools try to control the contents of the student's mind, and that means we just try to pick and choose exactly what they learn. And this is not like picking standards to teach them. It's like picking only one strategy to teach a problem and not exploring the other ones, and just forcing a student to learn this way, even if that's not how they learn best. And that ties into the knowledge of, like, not meaning what we say, in terms of, like, you can solve a problem anyway, and then reprimanding them or making them feel dumb for using another strategy. And then this also ties into when teachers are loving to their students and they say words of love, but they use a condescending tone. And we're never speaking loving words over the students. So they hear us say, oh, we love you, but like we don't mean it. Or they think we don't mean it by the way we carry ourselves and the tone of our voice. All of this creates that lack of confidence and self-worth, which ties in again into the fear of failure. And then the last two big reasons schools fail are is that we built schools around producing good test takers and not intelligent students. And I'm sure all of you know, I mean, I remember in school, we just took standardized test after standardized test after standardized test. We're raising up a generation of students that only know about tests. They don't know anything other. We teach the test, we study for the test, and then they move on and they forget everything they learned. When instead we should be focusing on building intelligence and understanding in students. And the last way is that we teach inconsistencies. And by that, I mean, we never stop to second guess if what we're teaching makes sense. And I talked about a little bit about that in the last part. Is just that we teach something and never second guess if it makes sense to the student. Never second guess if this is even the best way to do it. We just go with it and run with it blindly, and it can confuse students. So we really need to just sit and process and make sure what we're teaching students is at least understandable. And then the last big way that I thought was the most important was that schools only find out what a student does not know and uses that against them, and never finds out what a student does know and what they can do. Because if we know what they can do instead of can't do, again, we know where we can start to work with them. So, how to combat failing schools, why and how. We have to change the way schools operate. We can't fail our students and expect everything to be okay. We can't be like, oh, they failed this math test, but the next unit they'll get it. No. If they don't understand this math unit, they're not going to understand the next. And it doesn't help that we're failing them because we're just reinforcing that you are a failure. As teachers, we really shape the way students view themselves and their self-image. And if we're letting them down by failing them, we're not hurting ourselves, we're hurting the student, and they're the most important part. We have to consider if what we're doing and what we're teaching is helpful for the student or convenient for us as teachers. Because it's more convenient to just give out worksheets because that's less hands-on. We don't have to plan it as much, but that's not helpful to the student. It's not going to help them learn. We have to keep the students and their learning at the central focus of everything we do and just constantly remind ourselves of that. Ways we can do that is to foster courage and bravery in students, encourage the students to take risks and to try that new strategy we talked about, and then praise them when they do, even if they get it wrong, because you know what? They tried something new. We need to mean what we say. And it's okay to get frustrated with students because everybody gets frustrated with students, but that's when, as a teacher, you can take a step back and not snap at them. Because then if you don't snap at them and don't lash out and you come at them from a place of love, being like, I love you, like what happened was not okay, let's move past it. They know that we love them first. And if a student is not understanding a concept, find a new way to teach it. And this ties back to the strategies, and this applies to math, science, ELA, social studies, anything. If it's not working, see if we can find another way, even if it has to be individualized, whatever's going to help the student. Allow the students to grow and learn at their own pace. Of course, this has to happen within reason. We can't let a student get super far behind, but we can't just keep pushing them forward because we know it's not going to benefit them. And then lastly, 2 questions to really consider which can help combat the failing of students is like, always think about, where are we going? Like, what goal are we reaching for and how are we getting there? What steps are we taking to ensure every student reaches this goal? And then also think about, is what we're doing helpful to the student? I said this in the last slide too, just like constantly be thinking about, am I helping my students or am I hurting them? So now we know all about the book and ways we can implement it and like how helpful they can be. But now I want to explain like why personally I think we should implement these practices and why it's so important. There are tons and tons and tons of reasons why, but I'm only going to talk about one, and it's what I talked about in the beginning, that as a teacher, we are taking responsibility to prepare our students to be successful in any walk of life that they choose. We are the ones preparing them and giving them the tools and resources and support necessary to reach every dream they set for themselves, whether it is to go to college or to go into the working force or to go into the military or anything. Like, we're preparing them for that. And if we're letting them down, we're only setting them up for failure, which is what they're scared of anyway. And like I said, success does look different for each student, but we can still give tools for each student to be successful. And Holt's book really shows these ways that students are not successful on their own, and then with our help, we kind of make them unsuccessful. It's a combined effort, but he provides ways that we can change these bad habits and create teaching practices to create a better learning environment. These techniques make school enjoyable for students and teachers. It makes students understand that at school they are loved and they can learn because we're putting in our all, and so are they. Students don't come to school wanting to upset us. They come to school wanting to please us. You can see that all the way from kindergarten to grade 5. Like, students want to come and be everything they can for us as teachers. And this book can also help create an environment that us teachers enjoy as well. When our students are happy, we're happy. When our students are learning, we're ecstatic and we're excited, and we can share in their successes. And these practices Holt talked about can really, 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 truly benefit us as teachers. And that's why I think we should use it in any school we're in, even if we have to do it individually, or hopefully one day it can be school-wide. But these are just so, so important. These are the resources I used for my project. I only used the book. I discussed a little bit with my practicum teacher, but she had never read the book before, but she had actually seen a lot of the failures that students have, and she liked the ideas that I was talking about. But everything you see in the PowerPoint just comes from the book and then my own personal ideas. That's all I have for you guys. So, thanks.